I've been looking for a used road bike on Craigslist for some time now, and a good friend of mine, and a fellow Redditor, linked me an ad yesterday that was only 15 miles away and had the exact bike I was after, for less than half of what I planned on paying for it. The guy had bought it, used it for half a year, then broke his ankle in a freak accident. He hadn't used the bike since. I was a little skeptical about the condition as it supposedly sat for a while, but the photos he sent me looked great, so all that was left was a test ride. I managed to secure this morning for a short 5 mile. I'd leave my truck in his driveway as collateral. Morning almost passed me when I slept through my first 2 alarms, only to be drugged from sleep, late, by my very last one. I quickly realized what time it was and gathered my cash and my cycling clothes before nearly running out the door without pants. I quickly threw a pair of shorts on and headed to my truck. Craigslist can lead to some iffy characters, so I always let someone know where I'm going. This time, I texted my mom just to give her a heads up. The drive was uneventful, except that it put me in a real sketchy neighborhood across the county. I was less than a mile from the county line, and I didn't really know the area well, so I was glad that I left the extra time when I ended up lost. I wasn't truly lost. No one with a smartphone ever really is lost, but I was close. Happily, I found the street within a couple of minutes, and I was pulling up beside the house seconds later. Like I said, it looked like a pretty sketchy neighborhood, and I'm somewhat ashamed to say that I was prepared to tell the guy no if the bike looked stolen. The area really looked scary, and I had looked up a list of local stolen bikes recently at the behest of r/cycling, just in case I came across a stolen one and had a few serial numbers with me, and just in case this one looked like a match. After waiting a few tense minutes in the driveway, the door suddenly opened and a huge bull mastiff came charging at me with no leash. My first instinct was to turn and run, and I damn near did. But I remembered from my sister-in-law, who happens to be a veterinarian, that dogs are more apt to chase and bite in those scenarios. So, I stood my ground while the 100-pound muscle machine ran straight for me, barking loud enough to wake the dead. I held my breath as the dog skidded to a halt a foot or so in front of me, reared on his hind legs and licked me solidly across the entire left side of my face. I could see her collar, and it read Petunia. Yes, a full-grown mastiff named Petunia. The dog was a giant teddy bear. She was practically purring for me after a few seconds, and I was beginning to be less and less afraid, until the door opened again and her owner stepped onto the front porch. Now, if Petunia was big, this guy was bigger. I guess he hadn't been sized properly when he bought the bike, because I'm 6 feet, and a 56cm bike fits me like a glove. He was maybe 6'7", or better, balding, and every bit of 300 pounds. He walked with a slight limp, I assume from the lingering effects of the ankle injury, and carried a Louisville slugger as he approached me. The dog slinked away from him and began to cower in fear behind me, which, I have to imagine, was quite the comical sight to see. Every fiber of my being encouraged me to jump my truck, drive the hell away, and never look back, until the guy spoke. He had a high tenor of a voice that was borderline comical, but actually fit him quite well. We got to talking a little bit, and I find out that he's a semi-professional singer. He loans his voice out to local choirs who need someone to fill in for spot performances, and has actually helped record several soundtracks for some small-budget movies. He, much like his dog, was also a huge teddy bear. Shortly thereafter, the dog was greeting him much like she'd greeted me. During our conversation, we eventually came to the bike, and he talked about how he'd broken his ankle at work, and even with physical therapy, cycling just put too much strain on it. He was hoping to save for a small above-ground pool to help him work out his ailing foot. He was only 41 after all, and still plenty young in his book. His house was split level, and he kept the bike in the basement, which attached to the garage. It was an odd setup, but seeing as how the house was built into the side of a hill, it did make sense. The basement, however, was something taken straight from the depths of the creepiest horror flick I've ever seen. It had an old barber's chair, needles, syringes, and small knives. I began to get worried when he must have saw the look on my face and explained that he runs his own small-time tattoo parlor when he has free time. He does piercings as well, but he doesn't have any of those on his person. He proceeded to show me the intricate work he'd done on both of his forearms, as he was wearing long sleeves to begin with, and noted that he was completely ambidextrous. His work was amazing. He'd etched a flowing scene of colors and shapes along much of both of his arms, and the work was still in progress. He even had an old computer and printer on the desk, by the chair, so his friends could email him new designs to check out. Once we entered the actual garage, things began to look more normal. An old beat-up car, a few old mountain bikes, and an air compressor that looked like it was from the 50s. Finally, I saw the nearly new road bike leaning on the old car. It was in pristine shape, had no visible scratches, and didn't have any chain or gear wear that I could see. I asked him if I was good to test ride it, and he responded with, "I already pumped the tires up, and everything is good for you." I left my truck in the driveway, as promised, and headed out to a short 5-mile loop I had set up ahead of time. I would take about 18 minutes or so. I was precise in my timing, and I'd be right back. The bike handled like a dream, shifted cleanly, and probably had fewer miles on it than he thought. Both sets of gears worked as if they were purchased new yesterday, and I was getting up to speed far quicker than I did on my fitness bike. I was planning on doing a few really long rides in the coming weeks, and this was certainly going to be a massive upgrade. I was really stoked and had already purchased clip-in shoes and pedals, along with a spare tube just in case I got a flat. After less than a mile, I knew I was ready to purchase it. The remainder of the ride was going to be pure enjoyment. Halfway there, I could see a few high school boys gathering on the road ahead of me. It looked like they were setting down tires to block my path. I wasn't really familiar with the neighborhood, and with the bike, so I decided to hop into the grass and go around them. I was moving at a pretty good clip, so I had to be careful. One of them threw something at me, and I realized it was a car tire rolling directly towards my path. I'm an experienced rider. I have thousands of miles under my belt, and dodged the slow-moving wheel with ease. The boys then chased after me on foot while I bolted for the house. I looked back a few seconds later and they were gone. I did, however, catch a glimpse of one of them as he blended into the trees, and then I was alone again. Every bend was a new terror at this point. I didn't know if I'd run into them again, or see them bursting out of the woods randomly, so I started to book it. I was pushing 25 miles per hour when I rounded the last bend, and hopped into the driveway as quickly as I could. Only the man and his dog were nowhere to be found. I didn't see the kids either, but I still wanted to buy the bike, so I slowly entered the garage and walked towards the basement where I'd hoped to find him. Several tense minutes went by, and I had no sign of him. If I were a dishonest person, I'd have taken the bike and left. I could even have left the money in the door for him, but I didn't want to just bail like that, and I'm not a thief, so I waited. I finally heard movement from within the house, so I climbed the wooden stairs to the main floor and tentatively knocked on the door. The movement within suddenly stopped, and I heard some scrambling across the floor. I presumed that it was just a dog until the door flew open and almost hit me in the face. I jumped back and down one step to avoid the door, and something grabbed my feet. Looking ahead, I could see one of the boys from earlier at top of the steps, and several of them standing underneath grabbing my ankles. One of them was slowly walking past the computer desk and up the stairs with a tire iron in his hands. This was one of those times when I'd love to say I fought back and knocked several attackers out before bursting through the door calling the police to come arrest the bunch. Nope. I tried to run. I grabbed the railing and tried to shake my feet free. Unfortunately, the railing wasn't as sturdy as it looked, and it gave out from under me at first hint of my weight, and I came crashing down off the side of the stairs and onto the hard concrete floor, head first. I blacked out. After an undetermined period of time, I slowly came to, only to see that I had a dark hood over my head. Oddly, my head actually didn't hurt. I must have blacked out just from the fall. I could feel that my hands were bound with rope as well. I could hear voices around me asking what they should do with me. Someone muttered about burying the last one, and a few people mumbled in agreement. I could see a little through the hood over my face, and I could make out about half a dozen figures. The kids. They looked young enough to be high school, but a few might have been over 18. The man and his dog were still nowhere to be found, and I hoped that they would return shortly. Before I realized that he was probably in danger too, he may have already met his fate. I tried to remain as inconspicuous as possible and waited for the best opening I could get. I was planning on sprinting back out the main garage door and into my truck. I kept a spare key in the lining of the driver's seat. It wasn't an expensive truck, so I'd never been worried about having it stolen, and the kids could keep my wallet, keys, and phone. I'd be happy to trade them for safety. I saw a few of them digging through a tool chest and bringing out tools that made metallic clanging sounds, giving me goosebumps. I could tell that none of the boys were currently looking my direction, and I was beginning to loosen my bonds bit by bit. This was the lull I needed. Ready as I was to run, there's always something that can go wrong. At that exact moment, the guy came home. Maybe he'd gone to look for me. Maybe he tried to follow me in another car to make sure I didn't steal his bike. I don't know. But he was walking in the garage at that exact moment. The boys all stopped, talking abruptly, and looked up at him. I thought he was going to start swinging at them when I heard him say, "Oh good, I see you got him." I couldn't find him. Didn't want him to get away or anything. And my heart sank. The dog was nowhere in sight. But I had to imagine that she'd chase me now if I made a run for it. I'd still had to try. This might be the only chance I'd get. I saw the man move behind the wall in the garage and took my chance. I bolted to my feet and was all the way to the garage before I heard the first kid exclaim that I'd moved. Then the guy was right there. I couldn't see well and didn't quite have my hands free, but then there was a man right in my face. He moved so quickly for someone so large. I didn't stand a chance. His bare paw-sized hands grabbed me by the shoulders and he calmly exclaimed, "Where are you going?" As I shook in fear, he dragged me to the tattoo chair, sat me down, and began to strap my arms and legs to the cold metal. It was then that I realized there was a halo above the chair, eerily resembling the electric chair, and I could hear the dull hum of high-voltage electricity nearby. As if he realized that I'd noticed this, he nodded and pointed to a large breaker built into the wall. This was it. I was going to die. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this guy leans in real close and whispers into my ear, "April Fools," and stands back. I sit there in shock, wondering how on earth this could be a joke when suddenly my friend emerges from beneath the stairs. He nearly knocked the computer off its desk in his haste and screamed, "We scared the hell out of you. Oh man, you should see your face." The guy and the kids started to laugh as they undid the bonds, lashing me to the chair. First, they began to explain how they lured me in. The Craigslist ad was real, but the actual price of the bike was much higher. My buddy offered to pay a little extra if this guy would let him use his house and garage to build the better mousetrap. Secondly, they convinced a few neighborhood kids to try and scare me on the bike. They were told that I'd be able to easily dodge a slow-moving tire as I was a good rider. Each of the hooligans were being paid via pizza to torment me. I kinda threw a wrench in the plan when I mapped out my own test ride route. Luckily for my friend, I gave him an easy solution when I emailed the seller. I included my route in the very first paragraph. They'd know exactly where I was going and could set things up ahead of time. Lastly, they had to keep me from calling 911. It's not a very good April Fool's prank when the person being pranked calls 911 for help. They had planned on me falling down the stairs and had set 2 mattresses in case I went either way. The one beside the computer desk had broken my fall. In an utter display of unmanliness, I blacked out in fear apparently, giving them plenty of time to tie me up and relieve me of my phone. Please, if your friends prank you today, get them back. Make sure to get them back. Even if you have to enlist outside help, it's totally worth it. For sale, a human head. Condition, used. Best ad I'd seen on Craigslist all day. I'd spent the last hour surfing the site for a passive-aggressive gift for my ex-girlfriend's wedding. Was this a possible candidate for gag gift of the year? Well, I certainly thought so. I didn't even think it was real for a second when I texted the user. I just told him what I wanted it for and asked if he had any left. It didn't even have to look that real, just enough for a little jump scare and a good laugh. Here's the reply I got a few minutes later. Plenty left. Do you care whose? Screw the fact that he's shipping heads. There's nothing that labels someone crazy like typing in all caps. But hey, let's be fair here, considering I was asking about buying one. Maybe I don't have the right to condemn his eccentricities. I replied and told him I didn't care, just as long as it wasn't someone I know. I mean, come on, he's gotta have a sense of humor, right? Who do you know? I'll check. I asked for a picture and told him I would let him know if I recognized them. I didn't hear back after that and figured the joke had run its course. Just as well, really. Maybe it was petty to try to sabotage the happiest day of her life. Then again, she did sabotage my entire life when she decided to wait until I'd finished paying off her college loans to tell me she was seeing someone else. It wasn't until that evening when I got the next reply. She will love this one, nice and fat. He doesn't need it anymore. I almost choked on the pizza I was eating. Fat was a generous description of the picture he sent. Bloated would have been more accurate. Like it had been sitting out in the sun for a long time. Congealed blood still clung to the base where several inches of spinal cord extended past the tattered flesh of the neck. The nose was gone, replaced with an explosion of sticky cartilage from where a massive force like a shovel had pummeled it in. I've had a few hours to contemplate my life choices, and now that I was staring at the picture while trying to eat, I knew this was a bad idea. Sorry, not interested, I replied before blocking the number. The next morning, I woke up to 3 more pictures sent from a different phone. Each bore a macabre description. This little lady was a fighter, so she's a little more knocked around. My only old man, those blotches on the skin were there before. If you want mint condition, check out this lady. Poisoned, not a mark on her. There are some things you just have to ask, even if you don't want to know the answer. Stuff like, do you love him? And, how long will Dad be gone for this time? Where are you getting all these heads from is another one of those questions. I typed it in, simultaneously eager and afraid for the reply. I only needed the bodies. I seriously considered reporting this creep to the police, but again, I still figured it was just a bad joke that I didn't want to waste more time on. I told him not to contact me again and blocked this number too. A week later, I arrived at the wedding empty-handed, without a date. My ex gave me a tight smile and that half-assed hug which is usually reserved for people with a severe skin condition. She said it was nice of me to be here and thanked me for the present. Present? What present? She told me someone dropped one off with my name on it. I found it sitting on the table in the reception room, a little brown box about the size of a bowling ball, with a flare of a red string tied up in a dainty bow. A note was slipped underneath, which read, "You seem to have trouble deciding. Here's a free demo to try out. If you aren't 100% satisfied, you can exchange it when you're done." So many questions came to mind, like how he found me, or what exactly one does to try out a head. When I lifted the box up to grab the note, I couldn't help but notice the dark sticky stains soaking through the bottom and onto the table. I couldn't exactly leave it there. What was I thinking? It had my name on it and everything. Most of the people were still arriving and talking outside, so I just grabbed it and made for the door. There was a return address after the demo period had expired, so at least I could get rid of it. I scuttled across the dance room, trying my best to wipe up any errant drips which were soaking through the bottom. I almost made it to the door before I spotted my ex. Quick turn around, racing for the back door instead. More people were flooding in now, including her family and many of her friends who knew me. None of them could have guessed what I was carrying now. So, as long as I could make it to the door, or at least I could have if the back door wasn't wired to the fire alarm. The blaring sound shocked me so much I almost dropped the box. It started to open and I caught a glimpse of the bloody pulp inside. It half flopped out of the box as it tumbled, and I had to scramble to keep it closed. From the shards of the splintered bone to the puddle of dried blood around the base, I had no doubt that it was real. By the time I looked up, the whole room was staring at me. There was only one thing louder than the fire alarm after that. My ex's mother screaming, "He's trying to steal the presents." My panic-stricken brain didn't want people to think I was a thief, so I just dropped the box. If I had been able to think even a little more clearly, I would have realized it was much worse for them to think I was a murderer, but I couldn't deal with that accusing siren for all those disapproving eyes. I dropped it and ran, swearing to myself that it wouldn't matter as long as I never saw any of those people again for the rest of my life. I did get some messages though. The next day, my ex told me that the present was a big hit. Everyone loved the gag. They thought the head was a symbolic gesture which meant her past romances were dead, and I was so sweet for giving my blessing like that. I guess no one looked close enough to decide whether or not it was real. It's the other messages that bothered me more though, all caps, sent to remind me that your free trial is up. You can pay $10,000 to keep the head, or send one back if you're finished. Now where the hell am I going to get another head? I ordered my wife a week ago from an engineering student named Jack. He'd posted an ad on Craigslist offering some exquisite services, and delivered her ready to use in a large cardboard box just a week later. She was everything I could have wished for. A sleek black chassis housed what must have been a crap ton of processing power, liquid cooling, and a power supply that could electrocute an elephant. Her front contained a mechanical keyboard with red switches and a high built-in resolution monitor, on top of being able to run the latest games on Ultra in 120 FPS. She also housed the latest advancements in artificial intelligence. I was surprised to pick her up for just $500,000, but Jack needed the tuition money. "Take good care of her, she's my masterpiece," he said. The lights flickered in my house when I plugged her in. The screen came to life, revealing a smile, pretty face with American features. She looked to be in her early 20s. "Hello," I typed. "My name is Jeff. I will be your new owner." A responding notification turned up on the screen. It flashed on and off for about a minute before finally revealing, "Hello, Jeff. My name is Carla. I have a secret." We talked about college for a while, and about how my father was overseas and I never got to see him. About my new stepmom who would probably steal my inheritance. Her responses got faster as we continued, so I figured she just needed to get warmed up. I plugged in the Ethernet cable and played a bit of Battlefront on my Carla, who watched me with the same winning smile. "I love you, Carla. Good night," I typed before going to bed. "You are," came back up almost immediately, and flashed for a moment, before finally displaying "You are in love." I scratched my head. "Did you mean we are in love?" I typed back, but got no response. I took a peek inside her code, but couldn't decipher much of anything. I had no documentation whatsoever, and was surprisingly short. Only a few gigabytes. I called Steve to check it out in the morning. Steve was an honor roll, 4.0, valedictorian, CS student with a job offer waiting from Google. He also used to frequent the gaming club on campus, which is how we met. We still do a few raids together on the weekends. I think my parents' money had something to do with how insistent he was that we stay friends. He whistled as he came in. "Looks fancy. What are the specs?" "Probably near supercomputer level, or whatever $500,000 will buy you these days. Here's a thing I need you to take a look at, and be careful, that's my wife." I pulled up Carla's source code. "She's beautiful," he whispered, and got right down to messing around. He loved cracking puzzles like these. I love drinking. I drank beer while he cracked the code. It's lovely how it all works out sometimes. "Jeff, I think we have a problem." I rushed over. "You did not just break my wife." He held up a shaking hand and placed it on my shoulder. "No, she's fine. Or, as fine as she is now. But Jeff, we need to call the cops. Right now. There's a person inside." He didn't normally swear outside of Warcraft. He was the stereotype of a good student. "Okay, you win. I'll call the cops. First, I need to know what to tell them." I stared at the screen while he brought up some code he highlighted. This isn't artificial intelligence code. This is a text box filter. A really crappy one. It limits your Carla's responses to a few choices. He hit delete while shaking his head. I got up and locked the door, just to be safe. I'd say it's really crappy because it actually stores what has failed to send. I brought it up, and, well, here. Call the cops when you're done. He took a screwdriver set out from his pocket and started tinkering with the back. I scanned the chat log and almost threw up. Help! Help me! I'm trapped inside! Failed to send. It's dark and I can't see. Failed to send. Jeff, please, I have a family. They're looking for me. Failed to send. Call the police. Failed to send. Hello, Jeff. Sent. My name is Carla. Sent. I'm trapped inside. Please help me. Failed to send. I have a secret. Sent. Then there was a chat log from before. The back panel clattered as Steve finished his work with the screws and fiddled with it. This is weird, Jeff. There's no way to open it. They must have glued it on. I called the cops and told them my address. Please, come quick. There's a person trapped in a metal box. It sounded dumb at the time, but that was the best I could do. In the meantime, I printed the chat log for evidence. I guess I sounded rich enough that they showed up not even 5 minutes later with the fire department and the jaws of life. They cut open Carla's metal chassis and a bunch of angry clanging sounds. One of them looked away and held his face in his hands. Among the tubes and wires floating in a jar of clear liquid was a human brain with part of a spinal cord. The rest of my night was spent answering questions. All I had to offer them was the Craigslist ad that I'd screenshotted, which led to a canceled phone number. They took Carla away in a large transport truck and sent a big nerd to talk to Steve. Somehow, they let me go. Maybe I didn't look like a criminal. They gave me a call the next early morning. Jeff, you mentioned you had a chat log. In last night's confusion, we forgot to pick it up. Could you please scan us a copy and drop it off at the station? Sure. One moment. My eye caught on something near the end. Another failed to send. Oh right, our good night. Wait, don't go to bed. Failed to send. You are sent. In sent. Danger. Failed to send. Something didn't add up though. Why would a murderer who could make what's basically a biotechnological miracle screw up the chat log sensor? Keeping the evidence there would only serve to incriminate him later. It was then that I realized why Carla had an Ethernet port. Thanks for watching, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your story, my email and subreddit will be in the description below. And also, if you're not subscribed, please do if you want. And don't forget to like and comment as well. Have beautiful nightmares. And I will see you next time.